Hello and welcome to another episode of Film Spill, a movie night podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea. Film Spill, if you already don't know, is a podcast that comes out every week, and we talk about a movie by a female filmmaker every episode. We also discuss women in the entertainment industry in general. We play slumber party type games, spill entertainment gossip, and get to know each other and our guest. This week, we have a very special guest, Devin, who is a company diversity advisor with Onyx. Welcome, Devin.
Hi, how are you? How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on. We got to chat a little bit before we got this episode started. I really love Devin's energy. We already got a great conversation going about our film business, telling each other the tea. So what
true.
initially got you into film?
What really got me into film, I mean, God bless it, but Disney Channel, like they really screwed me over.
I feel that. The Sprouts twins is what really got me.
Sprouse Brothers, I mean, Raven Simone, Miley Cyrus. Definitely, like, I like to call them the Big Six, the Jonas Brothers, Smiley, Debbie, Selena. I mean, really, for me, it was programming. Like, I grew up without cable. I actually didn't really have a TV. So every single Saturday on like Fox or Warner Brothers would have these Saturday morning programs, and it was at least like one syndicated episode of each of the shows that were on Disney Channel. I fell in love with it. I absolutely loved it. And I just forever wanted to be on TV. Like I wanted to perform. I was just like, whatever they're doing in that box, like I want to be on the other side, doing that for other kids. I also was like really deep in church, which is so crazy, but like my church was so very like theatrically based and musically based. So it was everything. There was theater, there was dance, there was singing. And so I was so involved with everything, and it just really exuded out of me like all the time. And it was a mission that I was on that by the time I got to college, I was just like, I sat my parents down. I was just like, I'm going to go to school for film. This is what I'm doing. And then from there, it changed. The ball game completely changed. And then I moved out to California a year after starting college. And I feel like the rest is kind of history in that. But that's really like why I wanted to be in film, was just honestly watching TV and watching sitcoms, just child-friendly sitcoms, and wanting to be a part of that.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I feel like that's where my love came for film and television, is because as a kid, that's all I would do. Like I would watch Disney Channel for hours. Like that's all I would do, or watch like Nickelodeon as well. And I'm like, I want to do what they do. Like I wanted to play those Disney Channel games. Like I really thought that I was going to be like a child star and that I was going to be doing like that Disney Channel sign. Like, I'm Chelsea and you're watching Disney
100%.
Channel. Like, I practiced it like freaking thousands of times. Like, exactly. And, my mom was not about me going to school. Like, I told her I wasn't going to go to school because initially I wanted to act. And then she's like, no, you're going to go to school. Like, you're going to get a degree. But, going to school for acting, I wasn't set in it. And I'm like, I'm not vibing with this, but I loved film. And I'm like, what can I do? So, and then when I got really introduced to like, just like the positions that you can be in film, I'm like, all right, game over. Like, this is what I see myself doing, is like being the creator of these stories,
Yes. So, yes. Yeah. And I feel like it fits so much better because I feel like growing up, I feel like for me, I started to realize that like the people who were making the shows, they had a little bit of like a different idea in mind. And I was just like, I want to keep the heart of it, the heart of what I was influenced by, not by the people who were behind the scenes, but the people who were on. So it's almost as if I get to bring that energy, of like what I saw get like with people on screen, now as a creative on the back end,
Yeah. So what do you do like currently in film?
Oh, good. So currently, Currently, I am an executive assistant for a CEO of a film company called Sobini Films. They do a lot of independent projects. This is definitely like kind of like a big girl job. It's I say like it's a big girl job because it's definitely at a weirder capacity than what I'm used to. But a lot of the stuff that I do independently, all creative based. I 100% consider myself a creative producer, a writer, a performer when I do have the time to do it, whether it's theatrical or commercial, mainly commercial right now. But definitely just in all aspects of the film industry, trying to hit it in all avenues, you know?
So what would you say is your dream job? Like, what is your career goal in the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself doing?
So I I am giving entrepreneur vibes. Realistically, I am now in this avenue where I want to focus on business and I want to focus on just like financial literacy and being able to build some sort of financial stamina for myself. Um, Definitely in regards to entertainment as it's an avenue, but I am starting to see, you know, other ways of building some, not necessarily passive income, but I'm now in a space where I'm recognizing just investment. So in a way that it started working on like projects and opening the avenue of like transmedia and you know internet and marketing and all of that stuff, it's now grown into okay, how can I expand this side of me that is, you know, that loves entertainment and bring that almost as a personality into my other, you know, ventures. And so ultimately, as of right now, like I am a creative producer and I am hoping to branch off and be like a full businesswoman, you know, with a lot of different entities going on at once. But yeah.
That's awesome. That literally, I feel like we're on the same wavelength. And I haven't heard someone say this back to me. I feel like I'm always the one saying this. So like it's so nice to like have someone that like you guys are like on the same page. And like honestly, I feel that. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand what it means to be an entrepreneur and to get yourself different types of avenues. Like think of yourself as a business model, like legit. Like if
Yeah.
you have these skills, why the fuck don't you promote yourself? Why don't you see yourself as like a business person and how can you sell yourself? But not in that type of way, right? We're not trying to sell no souls here. But like honestly, if you have the ability to be creative, you know the back ends of film, like and social media is huge. If you know the marketing aspect, like you there's endless amounts of opportunities. And that's what I'm trying to do as a creative as well. Like I don't want to, at the end of the day, I don't want to rely on someone else for my paycheck. And I don't want to rely on one avenue, right? Like it's the 9 to 5 job. I could work for an agency. I could work for like a talent agency, let's say, right? I work the 9 to 5, but what am I gaining out of it? It's just like, I'm still, for me, myself, how can I benefit? Yeah, skills, but what are the revenue? Like, that's it. You know what I mean? So it's like, start doing those side hustles. Like, whether
Yeah.
that's TikTok, right? Or whether that's making movies on the side, or whether that's you producing music videos on the side, other people's films, whatever the case may be, but keep yourself active so you have that extra revenue and you have
Mhm.
more like places to dip your hands in. You know what I mean? Get yourself involved. That's
Yeah,
how I feel. At
yeah.
least that's where I'm at right now.
No, I
Yeah.
second that 100%. I feel like when I moved out here, I was just like, why I was saying like I wanted to kill two birds with one stone was just like, okay, I'm learning the ins and outs of being behind the camera, but I very much wanted to learn what it was like to be in front of the camera. And it was like the passion of me wanting to say, oh, I am going into this, I'm fully going into this aware of the stakes that I'm putting myself out there as a performer. But I can say I can write. You know, I can say you want a sound person, I'll hold a boom pole. You know, like really, really being that person that's so versatile in the film industry to just get hands on deck. And I feel like starting out small, that's it. And I take that just within the film industry and I branch that out, because it's like when one thing doesn't necessarily pan out, it doesn't mean that it's not working, you know, it just means that there is a little bit of a lull. Like, just like you say, the stock market, it has its ups and downs. Think of that into your life. You know, every facet of your life is going to have its ups and downs. So what what wave are you willing to ride? What are you trying to learn to help yourself, you know, help yourself not go all the way down to the point where it's just like, I'm not getting on any auditions, I don't know what to do. Rather than like being in the helplessness of that, it's just like, oh, well, I'm not getting any of this, I can redirect my attention into this and then find success in that, so that when that other thing starts pulling up, then you can kind of veer and meander back and forth. But it's like you doing that for yourself and saying, I can dip my toe into all of these different avenues, rather than, you know, being like stuck in one thing. Like the whole agency thing, for example, like I did not want to be in an agency. I didn't want to be a part of an agency like at all. Being a part of like either big multimedia conglomerates or even sometimes independent studios, like some of them were just too big for me to, I felt like I was, you know, going to get swallowed whole. And like even to get into this scenario that I'm in now, it's like it took so much for me to do that, to
okay, I'm actually going to do it. But the reason I did it was not just because the CEO, like, not because the CEO was just like, oh, I have all of this success with like Lionsgate or whatever. It was just like, no, I am a businessman. You know, I'm an immigrant, you know, like I'm an immigrant and I'm a businessman, and I want to make this, I want to make a career for myself in all of these different avenues. So if, you know, things are down in entertainment, I've got my farming company. You know, if things are down in farming, because the seasons are weird, I still have my properties, you know. So that the balance of it all for me, I was just like, I'm getting into this not just because I'm working for a production company, but I'm working for a business. Like I'm working for a businessman. I'm working for somebody who can like firsthand, I can see the ins and outs of how business runs, and your ideas of saying like, I want to tap into this, I want to invest in this, I want to hear this pitch from this startup. So, you know, that again, business, but not to get like technical with business or anything like that, because obviously we're in entertainment, but it's just like, it's just an avenue, you know, like they call it the entertainment business for a reason, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But what I was gonna say on behalf of that is that like I feel like you have to like this industry, like you really have to love this industry to want to keep up with it. Like this is a lot of like no's. Like you're gonna be giving a lot of no's, you're gonna have a lot of like downfalls, but if you really like and you really have like a lot of passion for this industry, I feel like that's what keeps you pushing along. And especially that like this is because this industry is so versatile. I feel like a lot of people don't even talk about like how many different roles that you can take on behind the camera, even in front of the camera, that like people just like don't even like think about it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even know. Before I even got into film, I was like, oh, there's a production design? Like what?
I think that that's like, I think that that's like, so it's definitely such a wonderful asset to have. I think what's funny is when I started acting, I was able to give myself a little bit more grace. And it wasn't until, funny enough, I had representation when they every single month would give me, you know, what I was, how many things that I was submitted to, how many things called me back for an audition. And then from that, and you would think like, oh, like when people are just like, oh, that was like my first audition ever. Oh my God, diamond in a rough, lightning in a bottle, fantastic. But for the people who had been in the industry for 10 years before they even got their big break, it's like that's 10 years of a consistent investment. That's 10 years of getting submitted to something. Probably you're getting 50 submissions in a day. That's like almost 2 submissions in a day just from what is being released on a breakdown that you're available to, you know, be submitted for, aside from all of the submissions. You know, once you tailor those things down, it's like what then actually fits for you. And so it was like, okay, I can't get so heartbroken if I go to an audition and I don't get it. I can only be happy about the one that I got a call back on, or the contract that I signed to actually do that work. Because maybe for that month I was submitted to 77, you know, like breakdowns, but I only got 5 auditions, you know, like 70, you like get the way out. So it's just like, if you don't try 77 times, you're not going to know if you don't even try once. Like imagine the fraction of the opportunity for you to get that done. And it literally goes into what we were saying of just like, if you're not even putting yourself out there and you're saying that you want to do all of it, and you're being all talk, and your actions aren't speaking for itself, it's like you've got to prove to yourself. And I feel like, again, in that avenue for me, it was so narrow, and it's so specific with acting, and then it's being above the line and on camera. Then you think about, all the other ways, you think of everybody below the line. So yeah, that G&E, that G&E member who's trying to get into the union and trying to get his union hours to get it and get his dues paid and get his hours in for the year. There's so much leading up to that just to even get the hours in the year to qualify for it, so you could even apply. So it's like there's so many rules and there's so many steps in it, but as long as you're willing to take those steps, that makes a difference. That makes the biggest difference.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like even like the union, that's like a whole nother ball game right there. Like that I have debated so much. I'm like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? But honestly, a lot of people that I started off working non-union are now in the union. Everyone's leaning towards it. But honestly, it's because their benefits are on point. Like especially times like this, the medical insurance, they be covering everything. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about Angela Robinson's drama film Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman 2017. But first we're going to be playing our Slumber Party type game. So this I wanted to tie into the film. So I created a Would You Rather superhero edition.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm going to ask you, which one would you rather? And you can elaborate, if you have a preference, or if you don't know, just kind of go with the flow.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay. So number 1, would you rather be Supergirl or Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman, hands down.
Do you have a preference why?
Really just because of the lore and the culture behind how Wonder Woman was raised, whereas like Superwoman, I feel like the world that she grew up in is still a little bit I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just it's Metropolis. I mean, is she still in Metropolis? I feel like for me, I also just I like the title of woman rather than girl. Maybe it's that that self-explanatory.
I like that. No, I totally feel that. Like I feel like Wonder Woman, I feel like is giving credit to us as like a maturity level. Like we're women, like girl, I feel like is kind of, it sounds like belittling in a way.
Yeah. And I feel like also super and wonder, I feel like you use the word super when it's like super cool, but then like the wonder, you're just like, oh, but the wonder of it all. Like you're just like, oh, like I feel like there's more to take in. But yeah, Wonder Woman, hands down.
I love that explanation. All right, number 2.
Okay.
Would you rather be Batwoman or Catwoman?
Batwoman. Oh, Batwoman's so badass. I think that there's something so enticing about, some of like I would say the grimly darker superheroes, like they have a slyness to them, but Batwoman can fly, like maybe Catwoman can like jump from like building to building, kind of like Spider-Man, and like land on, all fours, like because, cats have 9 lives and that whole idea. But I love Batwoman in the sense that she is to par with Batman. Like, do we know of Catman? I don't know.
No.
It's so isolating. Whereas like, yeah, it's so isolating in its idea. And I think I love the prestige that comes with just the Bat franchise. And I love if I were to walk in as Batwoman, it's just like, oh, she's a real deal right there. Like that's Batwoman. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like when you come in pairs, it's like the dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I feel like it's like a force to be reckoned with.
100%. Like I think it's like your reputation speaks for itself in its own vein.
True. I feel like Catwoman isn't talked about enough. Like no one really
No,
knows of Catwoman.
and I feel like in maybe a devil's advocate like world, I would say Catwoman just because I'd have a clean slate to like build a reputation upon. And she's so isolatory that there isn't anything comparable to her. Like I would say that, but unfortunately, I'm cliched at times, and I am totally honoring the idea of Batwoman. I think that's just badass.
True fan, true fan. That leads us to number 3.
Okay,
Would you rather be Team X-Men or Team Marvels?
that's a tough one. Okay, aside like just America diluting the crap out of Marvel, there is something very unique about the Marvel universe. At the same exact time, I think X-Men was an underdog for me growing up. You know, it was one of those franchises that like I wasn't too accustomed to as I was a Marvel fan through and through. But my mother and my sister, I guess they found some sort of kin to it and gravitated towards it so much. And I felt kind of left out on it. I was just like, wait, you guys are going to go to these movies? You guys are going to go to the movies together and see this? Um, but then I started watching them and I was like, oh, wait, this is fantastic. And I love the idea of a school that's there to educate and just really help. It's kind of like the idea of what you feel like education should be, just across the board, like without any superpowers, just a nurturing environment for people who have very, very interesting skills and learning how to harness them. I think that there's some you know what? If I can have a little bit of like just a little bit of room, I would root for the X-Men school over X-Men and Marvel. I'd probably just say the school that they went to, I stand behind 100%. So yeah, that's my take. I think X-Men just because of the familial sense that's not that doesn't feel too forced. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, who doesn't want to go to a school where everyone has their own superpower
I
and
know.
it's cool like what they're able to do. Like everyone's so unique. I don't know. I gravitated towards X-Men a lot more than Marvels growing up, and I don't know if it is because of the school aspect and how I felt
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like you built this connection with these
Yeah.
characters a lot more than I feel like Marvels does. I feel like they're more separated. They all
Yeah.
have their own separate stories, but these stories in the X-Men, they like come together and I like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not to say like there isn't movies out there where they do come together, but it's not the same, you know? I don't know.
No, I second that. I mean, Marvel, they give room to their origin stories, but I, I'm not opposed to that. I think it's more material. As somebody who's not as deeply invested, I do find myself going into a movie that's like through the through line of the Marvel sequence that I wanted to watch, and I needed to watch these filler movies, to get a gist of what was going on, and I missed out on that. And I'm in the theater, just like, wait, what's that? Whereas X-Men, it just explains itself. You have like one or two spin-offs here and there, but the story can be contained within one feature. And if another feature needs to come out a year later just to really harp it all together, so be it. But I like the dedication and in its simplicity.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, talking about superpowers, that goes into number 4, our topic for number
Okay.
4.
Okay.
So, would you rather have super strength or invisibility?
That's a tough one. Probably invisibility. I'm a spy. I'd love to be a spy. I'd love to be a spy, get the intel, have it aid to whatever mission or goal we're trying to accomplish as the winning team. But but I really do like just the stealthiness of invisibility. I think it has a very different feel than, say, I don't know, super strength. Like I think there's a part of me that loves super strength, but my super strength is so minimum. It's just like, could I potentially lift my own body weight's worth of things? Like it's so minor to just and limited to my body weight that it's like I don't want to have to pull a plane or anything like that. But I could if you wanted me to. I just prefer invisibility because I feel like I could travel invisibly. Like I could just hop on a plane and like, take an empty seat and travel somewhere for free, you know.
You could do so much with invisibility. Like, think
Yeah.
about all the award shows that you could attend and get like the 411 on everything, like eavesdrop on
Yes.
everyone's conversation. You
Come
know how they have that
on.
Instagram for like Gossip Girl, but it's like celebrity version? What is it called? Like DNOX? I don't know what it's called.
What?
You didn't
There's a
hear of this?
real life version of no, I'm not
Yeah.
in the in like that.
I didn't know about it until recently, until some people from my social media team, they told me about it. And I'm like, what? And so I started following them and it's legit. So like, people, write in to like, like Gossip Girl, they write in like
Yeah.
spotted Dakota Johnson at a cafe and they'll take pictures of celebrities at these locations, but it's like trying to be like real time. So if you're trying to like catch up with these celebrities, like people are submitting in real time. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh. That I'm scared. I'm scared of that. Wow. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. But I feel like, yeah, that could be an asset. That could definitely be an asset with invisibility.
Yeah. I just want to be in the and be able to like do
Yeah.
whatever you want because legitimately you can. It's not like anyone can
Yeah.
see it.
That's probably the best part. See, in my head, I was thinking of like Paris, like just going to Paris and like going to different part. Like for me, I was just like, I just want to travel different parts of the world and do that without having to really care about any expenditures, sneak into a hotel, get a suite by yourself, like maybe become uninvisible. I don't know what the rules are with invisibility if your accoutrements also invisible, but like still just being able to like see all the wonder of like the world and I don't know, see the seven seas. I don't even know. It's just ridiculous.
You could do so much. So
You
much.
could, you could.
Well, that brings us to our last one. What would you rather? Super speed or ability to fly?
Ooh, okay. So I loved Dash and The Incredibles, so I have to say speed. And I grew up running track and obsessed with The Incredibles, so that's why I say invisibility and speed. I know for a fact my partner would say fly because his
Mm.
dreams are all flying based. They're all flying based, and I think I like that. I think that I'm just a little bit more grounded. I'm far more grounded. I'd love to soar and see all of it, but I think I actually have a little bit of a fear of it. So yeah, speed 100%.
Yeah, flying. I used to be like so nonchalant about it in the beginning, and now anytime I get on a plane, I'm like, oh my God. I feel like because of
Yeah.
all the documentaries that have come out about airplanes and stuff, I'm just like
Yeah.
so paranoid now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
as
was
a kid, I
never
used to
that
love
way.
it.
Yeah, I totally agree to that. I greatly attest to like just flying around and not having a care in the world, and then all of a sudden there's like a shift. And I remember that the shift that happened for me, like I was traveling, I was kind of going to a bunch of different spots in the US, predominantly on the East Coast, and I was flying everywhere to get to those places, and there was one flight from, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was from Georgia to Tennessee. And that flight, I will never forget it. It was an hour flight, but it was so terrifying. And it wasn't actually a scary flight. Like nobody else was, I was the only one who was having a full-blown silent panic attack in my seat. So best believe yeah, I'll take speed. Just
Keep me on the
speed.
ground.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into our discussion for today. Like I mentioned before, we're going to be discussing Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman 2017. It is available to watch for free on Tubi, Roku, or Vudu. So go check it out. There's not an excuse because it's for free.
Yeah.
This discussion will contain spoilers for the film, so if you haven't already seen it, go watch and then come back afterwards to hear our thoughts. So, do you want to let us know why you wanted to discuss this film for today?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I love a good historical film. I love loosely based historical fiction. This is right up its alley. It really centers around an actual real-time professor. It centers around him and his wife and their educational ventures, just understanding critical theory, psychology, sociology, and just really how humans interact with one another and the socialisms of how that transitions over time. But I think in the time that it exists is so there's so many bylaws on how women can achieve their education, and I think that being, a good epicenter for the premise of the film is very thrilling because it is weird to think that like women weren't allowed to go to college. Like when you think about those levels of history, it's like, wait a minute, what? But it was real, like at a real time in our history within the US of A, like women were not allowed to go to college and get an education for themselves and be independent in their thought, in their just in their knowledge. And you have a man who is very much openly inspired by women and takes his career um, into a huge transition from being a professor into being what we now know as like the Wonder Woman franchise and the fundamentals of how that story was created. I think is really nice to see in live time. I think to really see the creation of something that we still hold true today. Like most people don't know about the disc theory, but they know about Wonder Woman. They know about those comics, and I think that's transcendent, to how a person lived their life. And I don't know, I hold major props to people who aren't just in one arena. It's like they were in this arena and that led them to this, but the knowledge that they have allows them to take on their new venture, full throttle. And it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I was really entertained about the fact that it is based on like true events and true like historical aspects of like, how did Wonder Woman come to be? Like, we don't get to dive into like the autobiographies of the
Yeah.
authors as much, especially
Yeah.
into their love life and
Yeah.
how their love was so unique, and especially in the time that they were in. Like, I was very amazed by where their love story ended up going, and
Yeah.
how it prospered. And honestly, so at the end of the film, there's a picture of Elizabeth and Olive, and I started tearing up. I started
Oh,
crying. It was just like it was a true like, full circle love story, and it ended like how
yeah.
you normally would in like films, but this was like real, and that's what I love about it, is that it's real.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that it was a happy ending, and that they lived to be old together, and they kept that last promise true to each other of sticking in each other's lives, regardless of the criticism that they were getting throughout the relationship. Oh, it's so
Yeah, yeah,
cute.
yeah. I still think of the line, "I'll love you for all of my days." And I'm just like, Ooh, you like underestimate that line and you like want to fall in love and then you get in a relationship and you're just like, all of my days, like all of my days. It becomes so tangible.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know what the film is about, Dr. Marston and his wife Elizabeth do research and teach at Harvard in the 1920s. The couple hires a student, her name is Olive Byrne, as their research assistant, and they work on inventing the lie detector. Soon the three fall in love with each other and enter a polyamorous relationship. During the course of the relationship, the two women are not only crucial in helping develop the lie detector, but also becoming the inspiration of his creation of one of the most notable female superheroes in comic book history, Wonder Woman.
That is pretty on the ball, pretty on the ball. But the only thing that I'd like to say is that Harvard back then in the 1920s was separated into two schools. So it was Harvard and it was Radcliffe, and Radcliffe was the equivalent to Harvard. But unfortunately, and very politically, they'd like to ensure that Harvard was not Radcliffe. But everybody knew that if you got into Radcliffe, you kind of got into Harvard. But Harvard was the only professional institution out of the two that would offer a PhD, and Radcliffe did not offer that.
Oh, that's interesting. And that's
Yeah.
why she was struggling to get her PhD because they wouldn't accept her
Yes.
at Harvard.
Yes. So Olive is a student at Olive Byrne is a student at Radcliffe along with all the other women, and you only see in that kind of courtyard the men and the women joining together, but the men 100% went to Harvard and the women went to Radcliffe. And Elizabeth Marston could not, even if she outsmarted every other male professor to achieve her degree, they kept denying her, and they would only deny her on the basis of her sex. It had nothing to do with her merit or her skill.
Wow, and that's why the opening credits it's because of the fact that she's a woman that they're not allowing to give her that opportunity. Because she knows
Yes.
she's smart and intelligent and she can outsmart them all, but they're not giving her the opportunity just because she's a female. And that's so unfortunate that that happened for so long. That's the
I know.
1920s.
I know. Like right out of the gate, like this is before the Great Depression, but it didn't even seem like the Great Depression really affected them in that movie. But it was tremendous to where we had to see her start, and how bad was it prior to that time? Like we already entered in where education is illegal, and she works as kind of like a TA in a sense. It's only Dr. Marston who gives her the permission to have a little bit more weight, but you even see in those classes she's sitting by the window, taking notes. She's not even instructing the class. She doesn't have permission to instruct the class. Like Dr. Marston has to take that that responsibility just because she's not allowed to.
That's so sad.
Yeah,
But they
yeah,
were such a great pair and they worked
they were.
like he didn't like make her feel less than, like he knew her capabilities. He knew how intelligent Elizabeth was of a person.
Oh man. Well, I mean, I say it's twofold. So I say that it's like I compare the two notes. So in the beginning, when Elizabeth Marston is talking to her husband, she says, "I'm smarter than you." And then he goes like, "I know." And I take that line and I compare it to later in the film, or actually like not too far later, but when Dr. Marston is getting prosecuted or just investigated for his personal life in comparison to the Wonder Woman comics that he made. So this is like a flash forward in the investigation of like whether or not the Wonder Woman comics had some explicit seduction tactics that were inappropriate or just not falling in line with what the traditional nuclear idea was for an American family. The investigator, played by Connie Britton, goes and the whole thing with the lie detector, and she is just like, yeah, the lasso is basically like a rope of truth. It makes like you have to tell the truth. You are completely almost hypnotized by this thing to tell the truth to whoever is the beholder of the rope. And then she was just like, yeah, it's based off of your invention, the lie detector. And then or she's like, yeah, my wife and I did that together. And then she was just like, I heard it was your wife's idea, like it was your wife. And it was just one of those moments where it was just like proved even further that his wife has completely outsmarted him, and he's honored that within the confines of their relationship. But as things start to progress, in the story and just in their lives, other people know how brilliant this woman was, and who knows what she would have been able to accomplish independent of him. But you also recognize her like reliance and her companionship and her partnership with him, for being who he is as a human being and not being like a megalomaniac. But even the investigator, who is a female, knew that it was like his wife who created it. Like everybody's just like, oh yeah, he invented the lie detector. No, it was actually his wife. But his wife didn't have permission to publish, didn't have permission to get the education to really talk about the analysis of her findings. She had to come up with all of the work, and her husband was really the face. Like, just talk
Yeah.
about, like, the new face of CoverGirl type thing. Just like, they're not doing anything. They're just putting a fake moisturizer while the camera's recording, type deal.
I know, not actually using CoverGirl.
Yeah, not actually using CoverGirl, but like because their reach and their influence means so much that it makes it, I guess, that much more substantial. So yeah. The power, the feminism in this just oozes.
Yeah, well, that's what it was great that it was directed by a female director to be able
100%.
to highlight that through the lens, just like female perspective. Because I feel like there wasn't overly sexualization of, where
No,
there could be,
no, yeah.
especially in the relationship.
Yes, 100%. Like,
Mm.
that's something so weird that like I'm obsessed with the camera work. I'm obsessed with the direction of every single shot. Every single shot. There's not a shot in that movie that feels like it was expending to information or giving us something that we did not need. And I love that conversation that Olive and Elizabeth have at their first outing. It's kind of like a double date when they go and visit these independent flyers, these aircraft flyers, and Dr. Marston wants to go off and see if they'll like let him go on the plane. And so it's like him and Olive's at the time, significant other or fiance, going to really convince these people to get a ride. And during that time, Olive and Elizabeth have this fantastic conversation that's just like, it's like asking questions, but then it's also eyes. It's also
Mm.
eyes and like the nonverbal communication that was so captured in such a small amount of time that I get so moved by sometimes, because you have you have Elizabeth answering these questions like it's almost as if Olive is like a host of a TV show, and she's just really trying to get into the skull of who Elizabeth is. And Elizabeth's just going on about how she and her husband met. But when it comes down to it, Elizabeth Elizabeth is faced with a question by Olive, like, why did you hesitate getting married? Like, there's more to this. It's like, it's not just like you guys are petty having arguments, on and off friends. It's like, wait, but why did you? And I think she notices something in Elizabeth that Elizabeth knows in herself, but it's been so deeply rooted because of the life that she's had to live. And just having somebody who is younger to like question that and put it on its head. I feel like in that moment, Elizabeth's character had never been asked that before. Nobody's ever inquired that before. So she looks kind of stunned and she goes, because like these are the reasons, because like he loves me and he's fantastic and she goes, and he's never boring, like he's never boring. And that's something that you need in just a relationship in general. And I think her, at the end saying like, I never thought that I'd find it in a man, gives the subtext of like, I probably knew I was queer growing up, but maybe with the exposure that I had, couldn't, live in this space in the open. And this is what I settled for. And it's not bad because it's probably one of my best options, and just that camaraderie, like in that moment, it's just like, oh my God, like moves me so much. I can't. I love every little conversation that they have, every little break. It's fantastic.
But that's awesome that you got that from, those aspects, you got that from just them gazing at each other in those moments. Like you really started to like catch on to the fact that Olive was interested in Elizabeth, and there was more than, than her just having this teaching assistant gig with her husband. Because, okay, so like a little backstory. Elizabeth pretty much warns Olive in the beginning of the movie, like, don't sleep with my husband. And that throws her off. And so you don't really see Olive having this admiration for Elizabeth until they start having these like conversations with each other. And then you can see in Olive's eyes, and that's me saying, like, you can see in her gaze that she's obviously interested in Elizabeth, and Elizabeth kind of senses something, but wants to have like this hard shell. Like Elizabeth's character is very hard.
Yes.
And that's why she pushes away like good things, or like things that are like making her feel feelings that she is like trying to hide from, So this is what gives you that initiation, like, okay, maybe she is interested in this, but isn't exploring the avenue, right? Or hasn't had the opportunity to. And so once they have that moment where it was the lie detector, right? This is when the lie detector happens, and they do the lie detector on Dr. Marston, and he fails because Elizabeth asks him, like, are you in love with Olive? And he lies and says that he's not, but he is. And so, she runs out and Olive runs after her.
Wait. Before we get to that climax, because there is, I want to keep the readers like on edge right now, or the listeners on edge. Like their little nuances, their little things that you can kind of pick up as that story's starting to formulate. So the like there are a couple scenes that I'm just like, they're so necessary to like really throw in to really give that culmination what it deserves. Like by that time the lie detector test works and is functioning, because there's like three different instances. There's one, exactly what you said, Elizabeth saying, hey, like just do me a favor and don't fuck my husband, like please. And like that, just the astonishment on Olive's face of just like, what? Like I also think of the facts that you have Elizabeth and Dr. Marston sitting on the steps of the courtyard, observing Olive, watching her and watching her moves. And what's weird is there was a little bit of a meet cute moment while she was in class, because of how Olive's gaze was towards Dr. Marston, and Elizabeth catching that, and that being a nonverbal moment of just like, I see you looking at this girl who's in your class, like out of all the girls, this girl. And so when we're sitting outside and we're watching this moment, Elizabeth knows exactly who Dr. Marston is looking at because she's right there in the courtyard. And so it sends like Elizabeth into this monologue of just, like beauty actually being a kryptonite. And to me, that was so impactful because it's like you see any beautiful person in the entire world, like any beautiful, like you could sit back and just be like, oh my God, that person is so beautiful. Like whether they're a man, woman, what doesn't even like their beauty literally takes you captive and almost puts you in some sort of like mental bondage because it's like I don't know how to talk to them. Like I don't know what to say. Like I don't even know what to do. You find yourself just watching them, just watching how they do probably the most mundane things. And I feel like that monologue that sends her off where she goes like beauty is albatross, like she's at war. Her beauty is basically like an armor for herself, whereas for everybody else, it's this shining, glimmering thing that they can't take their eyes off of. Um, so when, Dr. Marston reveals that like he like, she signed up and he, he's still like kind of studying her and observing her, Elizabeth kind of loosens the reins. And that's how you know that, like, even in their relationship, there's a little bit of openness because she goes, you know what, have some fun with her. Like, go do it, do it 100%. But that's almost giving him the okay to basically like sleep with this student, which is like so bizarre. But, she's giving that regard and she almost seems like dissatisfied watching Olive like, shoo off these boys left and right. And her almost decision in like her relationship, like she goes, because that's the life they've chosen. Like they have to sit there, smile, and pretend because that's the life they've chosen. And that kind of triggers something in Dr. Marston to just be like, what have you chosen? Like this is my wife I'm talking to. What have you chosen? What is it so deep? And then she's just like, I've chosen you. And it's so true. Like she did choose him. And she's just like, I chose you. That's really it. And I think in that moment of reassuredness, for Dr. Marston, it was just like, yeah, I made this active choice to be with you. But seeing him eye to eye and kind of reassuring him, she just then goes, you know what, fine, whatever. She even gives in because he's the one who's eyeing her, but she also has to give him almost permission to be with this person. She says, go be with be with her. Like I won't be jealous. Whatever, you have the freedom to do that. Um, and then yeah, I just think it's funny that Olive went to her first. Olive didn't go to him first, even though she signed up for his study. So she went to her first. And that's why I feel like she was thrown off and she didn't know what to do. So when they sat together just before that little like a whiskey night, because it's in the middle of the prohibition. So alcohol is illegal at this time. She just goes like, I don't know why you do this. Like, I don't know why men and women have this thing. And Elizabeth is just like, well, like I don't know how to defend myself. Like I am who I am, and like fuck it. And you get to see in that moment how Olive actually does have an investment with Elizabeth because she goes like, I read your paper. She's like, you read my paper, like oh, whatever. Like you don't have to feed me a line. And I was just like, I mean it. Like I I respect you as an educator. Like give me a chance to show you that I am not here just for your husband or your husband's looks or whatever, or just trying to get some extra credit. Like I actually do in fact care. And it's a little moment, and then you get a little moment again at the bar because Elizabeth tells Olive to stop apologizing, and then Olive gives her like a face, just kind of like, I'll get Annie up with you, and Elizabeth takes that and she's like, oh, like just like, oh my God, like very standoffish about it. And we all know what happened at the sorority house. We all know what happened there. It was very naughty, as somebody would say. But I think that gave room to like put Olive in a space where she had to be very honest about what was going on there and what she was feeling in that moment. And again, Olive and Elizabeth having this synergy. Elizabeth is the one who knew that she was lying. Marston knew, but didn't know what to do. And so he was all fired up, like, I don't know why she's not telling the truth. but Elizabeth was more looking at the nuances, why isn't like we don't know what's holding her back, uh, Dr. Marston's trying to get the truth, and he's like, I don't know what's holding you back, just tell the truth. And Elizabeth is more looking at the inner workings of why she's not telling the truth, what's happening. And that is the revelation of the lie detector, and why you get her heart beats faster, the systolic blood pressure, that huge moment that they get to have. And it's just like, she is the one who made that epiphany, because most of their communication has, for the most part, been nonverbal. Their connection and how they've gotten to one another has been nonverbal. So they've had to read each other's eyes and facial expressions and mouth and how they stand, or how their posture. And I think that analysis, that is a superpower that I think women have more so than men. 100%, just I think to date, is definitely the key factor into that revelation for the lie detector. So yes, you take away the lie detector thing. Go ahead. I wanted to add in those little bits because I needed to connect, like, why it felt so like this makes sense. All these little bits are necessary for the convincing of this. There wasn't much to convince.
Yeah, well, I mean, once they did start having a relationship, right? So like after the lie detector fiasco happens, then they go into, well, like Elizabeth doesn't want to accept the fact that like Olive's into her. And
Oh
so
yeah.
there is like that pushback. But Elizabeth has been pushing back throughout the whole film, and you like start seeing that in increments. Like she doesn't want to accept the fact that like, they could have this relationship and she can be with a woman as well. And
Yeah.
Olive, I feel like, is always trying to convince Elizabeth, and you feel for Olive. And especially when Olive is trying to have this, like, I think sexual upcoming of like her really exploring what she likes and what she dislikes. But like more so like her, I guess, moving outside her shell and her comfort zone with that. And you can see
Yeah.
that when she's like being bonded by the rope, and she's like, yeah, she's allowing
Yes.
herself to be bonded. And Elizabeth is like,
Yeah.
don't let them do that to you. And Olive's like, I'm okay with
Yeah.
it. Like, I want to
Yeah.
explore this. And like
Yeah.
Elizabeth was always, I feel like, pushing her back from that.
Yeah.
We've been pushing her back from a lot of things.
Yeah, I definitely take that into how Dr. Marston and Elizabeth Marston, like how they grew up. How their ideas are probably incredibly conservative, but in that like underground bar, Olive does in fact reveal, her family lineage. And it's just like, when you think of her family lineage and like who raised her, give me 1 second, but like who raised her and who, oh gosh. Yeah, like who, yeah, just the people who were involved in her upbringing. These people are also real life feminist suffrage, pushers from the beginning. We know, when we think of historically the women's suffrage movement, it was happening in such a parallel with the civil rights movement, and a lot of that really took into place and made a shift in in American history in the 60s. We have this story that, as we have said, has started in the 1920s. This is 40 years before the women's suffrage movement. This is around the time where things are starting to get a little bit more radical, like especially after we're really entering what would be the the great wars, of the 20th century, and the independence and I guess you could say strength that women were finding in one another. And so you have two people who have they're in their 30s or 40s, but they've lived a good amount of time in the world where things were unfair and very, very either racially divided or sex, like based on sex divided. And Olive comes in And she has such a radical way of thinking. And you question that, like, how is this person so free in their expression? I mean, she's one of the few women who are seeking an education from an equivalent of Harvard at Radcliffe. So in a way, she's already independently powerful. But come to find out, her mother is Ethel Byrne, the person who's at the forefront of the women's suffrage movement, and Margaret Sanger, who's literally her mother's like who's a relative of her, like of an aunt of hers. And Margaret Sanger, who we all know to date, and it's so crazy how her name has probably come up more in recent times than ever before. But she's one of the founders of Planned Parenthood. She is like she was like one of the first approvals for the birth control, like the pill that we now know today. Like on a historical level, she was trying to help women get to a space where they could have more independence in their bodies, had more control over their bodies and what they wanted to do. Maybe they didn't want to graduate high school and immediately marry up and start having kids. Maybe they wanted to get an education. Maybe they wanted a professional life for themselves. And I think those two women, ironically, being the raiser for this girl, Olive Byrne, only gives Olive the perspective that she has. She's a total feminist, and not in a way that's radicalized in the word that I feel like we use now. She is 100% fully enthralled in women empowerment, because the two people who were the most fundamental people in her lives also ironically had to be the two women at the forefront of the women's suffrage movement for decades before, not even 4 decades, 2 decades before we actually, no, I'm lying. Yeah, 4 decades before the women's suffrage movement actually gets kicked off. And you have these kids now, you have these, Margaret Sanger and Ethel Byrne being like older now, just being like matriarchs for this movement. And why I feel like Margaret Sanger's name has been coming up even recently is because we know what's happening, politically, and the overturn of like Roe v. Wade, and her name's coming up just because there's so many different Planned Parenthoods that gave access to women who needed the healthcare, just reproductive healthcare and reproductive literacy to their own bodies that they're not necessarily getting. So it's very, very deep to why I feel like Olive, just in her own, is who she is. And it's like when you get the inner workings of how she was raised and who are at the forefront for her life, it's like, oh, this totally makes sense. Even when what's his name? Even when the Professor Marston asked her, like, do you love your fiance? And she like darts a look at him, and he looks back, like she looks at him like, why are you asking me this? And he looks back like, it's a yes or no question. Like it's not even that deep of a question. Like, whoa, you made it seem like I had your mom in a like chokehold or something like that. And then he goes, well, your aunt, loves free love, like was a huge proponent for free love. And she's still very hesitant because of the relationship that she has with both her aunt and her mother. But still, nonetheless, it's like, I think it's what ends up gravitating, towards them in the first place. But go ahead, all of you.
Yeah, no, I think you put it into like perfect perspective on like how like she became who she was because of the influences, the powerful influences, and she didn't have like that norm that people were, I feel like, programmed to, especially in that decade.
Yeah.
Because even still today, there's still people are very conservative with their thoughts. So
yeah,
I mean, even more so back then.
Yeah, I second that.
I think that she came to terms with it a lot sooner than Elizabeth when it came to just an open marriage and being able to create this family, because they did have to, come up with a story up until the neighbors started to find out more about them, and people were harming their kids. So like they were getting these threats, and I'm like, that's so unfortunate, because people really don't mind their own business. They're getting hate for going outside of what is considered to be normal, right? Like that is forbidden. And they just they can't live peacefully, and they don't really go into depth with it after the fact that this incident happens with them and you start seeing the hardships, because that's when Elizabeth is like, I can't do this anymore, and like kicks out Olive, which is very unfortunate because she is acting this way because she is accepting the fact that, okay, yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, the neighbors are right. Like, we're just gonna keep getting more hate. And Olive is like, well, I love you. Like, I don't care what people have to say. And it's like, yeah, like, you shouldn't care. Like, you already have a family. And then, yeah, on top of that, they already have a family together. So it was like very unfortunate that Elizabeth did that to Olive. But then Olive like starts to have a great life. And then, you know, Elizabeth sees that, like, you know, she's doing well without us, you know? And it isn't until, you know, Dr. Marston is in the hospital because unfortunately he gets diagnosed with cancer. So he's sick at the hospital and he's just like, you know, Elizabeth, I'm gonna die. Like, you're gonna be by yourself, you're gonna be alone just because you can't accept the fact that you need her and you love her too. And it was so powerful. And they get on their knees begging for forgiveness, to have Olive back.
That does fall in line with the disc theory, like the disc theory in total, because you have these two people throughout the entire movie who have consistently played the upper hand. And they've naturally had the upper hand just because of their titles. You know, you have like professor and student, that's already controversial. But you know, even outside of that, they have a little bit more of a substantial like weight in society. So you even have their like the agreement that they made, or the story that they told to their neighbors is, no, yeah, Elizabeth and the doctor and Dr. Marston are married, and you know, Olive's widowed. You know, like they, being that they had to kind of make this ordeal, you really don't see that power shift or that power dynamic change until exactly how you said, Olive gets tied up, and it's from that point on that it almost feels like a climax, because it feels like a climax in their relationship, but not necessarily a climax within the movie. That, you know, they end up getting caught, and it's so weird how immediately you have this moment of time where Olive is actually starting to get the upper hand, and then it just gets pulled under the rug. And so you have this moment, you know, fast forward, Dr. Marston is going to die of cancer. Like, that is to the T what is going to happen. We know that he's not going to get out of it. And we see that, you know, we see that because we realize that he's sick from the time that he's getting investigated for these Wonder Woman comics. And, you know, them all coming together, and just Olive's reluctance, you know, she was so reluctant to even go in there. And she seemed a little bit more willing to do it on Dr. Marston's behalf, but definitely less willing on Elizabeth, because Elizabeth played such a huge role in her removal from the house, you know, like, and such a huge role in the permission of their relationship. You know, if you think all the way back to like them making that idea to say, okay, let's be together, you know, it was Elizabeth saying, no, let's be friends. You know, if you're not comfortable with it, let's be friends. Elizabeth having to run after Olive, you know, and finally kiss her and say, like, this is what's it. Elizabeth taking control of the facts that they needed to make a living, and being the breadwinner for the family. You know, on three separate occasions, you have her really being the head of the relationship. So it is just a sight for sore eyes when you see both of them get down on their knees in the hospital room and beg Olive for forgiveness, because they are relinquishing every ounce of power. Dr. Marston, from what he has, from what society has given him as a man, and then Elizabeth in her whole like embodiment of power that she's like shown throughout the entire movie, to now it getting flipped on his head for somebody who has just like who's always had the power in her. She's always had the power in her from the first time we ever saw her on screen. And somehow it's finally coming into this like moment of I am Wonder Woman, and like she's begging, like you have them on their knees begging for forgiveness, begging to take her back. And Olive is so steadfast and just like, no. And it's just like, fuck, like, oh my God, like, even like, just like, I want to melt out of my seat when she says no. I'm like, why would you say no? I'm just like, just give them a chance. You guys have been through so much together. Like, you can't string me along this entire movie and just what the heck? But no, she just, I think Elizabeth, and even just like the convincing of like Dr. Marston to Elizabeth, just get down on your knees, please, like beg her, like please, you have to beg her, and Elizabeth's just being like, I'm not doing that. Like her dignity is so much more, like she's so filled with like pride, she's such a prideful woman. So it's very interesting to kind of see that in real time get like broken down, because truth be told, like Olive's probably the only person, to be able to do that. Not even Dr. Marston can do it.
Oh my God, yes. I was definitely Team Olive. I was
yes. Yes.
Because I just didn't like the fact that like Elizabeth was like the upper hand the whole relationship. I did feel that, it's felt she's such a powerful woman. Okay, so I want to know if you caught on to when you were watching the film, did you catch on to the Easter eggs that were put in?
You're gonna have to tell me. What are these Easter eggs?
So apparently Robinson discussed that how parts of like costuming became Easter eggs for Wonder Woman in aspects of like what Olive was wearing. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Her bands were like the yes, Wonder Woman's golden bands. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes, that was one of them. And then there was another one.
Oh, was this when they were tying her up and she had walked out?
When she's wearing a toga.
Oh my gosh, was it for the sorority sisters thing? Yes. Oh my God, yes. Okay, game.
No, but you're catching them on. So yes, that's another one. And then one last one was Elizabeth. Elizabeth wears something.
Is it a scarf?
It's a coat.
Is it like one of those like tan coats, like a peacock coat with the buttons?
Like a peacock coat. It's supposed to be the cheetah coat.
Yes. Oh my gosh. When they first like had their thing, when they were all playing dress up. Yes. Oh man.
Yeah, she threw those in there. But that's so cute because it's like if you know your Wonder Woman like facts and you're like a huge fan, then you would know.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so funny. Oh, that's too good.
The attention to detail.
I love it. No, I really do love it. It's so small but so like imperative. Like I loved the crystal airplane that they gave William for his birthday, and he was just like, "Look, kids, look at what I got." And it's just like he's also a kid at heart, just playing with them, making weird airplane sounds.
How many kids did they have in total?
How many kids? As far as I'm aware, I thought it was 4. And then each of the kids, so one of Olive's kids, I thought it was 3 boys and 1 girl. And Olive named her kid after Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth or William or something like that. And then Elizabeth named her kid Olive. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I think
That's
they had 4 kids
interesting.
total. Yeah, it was very, very, very interesting.
Is there a part that really stood out to you in the film?
Oh man, again, nonverbal communication. All of the nonverbal communication, just all of it. I think that film has such a way to, I mean, you could say things obviously in a script. You could write down that dialogue. You could tell the actor to read those lines. But there's something about the direction from the director to the actor, alongside the director of photography, into just the actor's intuition of how they feel that character is going to react in that scene. That I think they took fantastic, beautiful liberties in, and it only drove the story even further. Like I felt like I was watching them actually live their lives and decide things for themselves as if it was coming to their head. I think it was just phenomenal performances all around. Yeah, zero complaints with any of it. Um, I think probably the one thing that stuck out to me that's probably more humorous than it is legitimate is just the fact that, like, who walks into people's houses, without knocking, without ringing the freaking doorbell? Like I've got a pickle, with the neighbor for I don't care what type of casserole she had in her hands. She should have knocked. She should have knocked, she should have rang the doorbell, she should have left it on the floor in the entrance, come back at a later time, respected their privacy. How dare you? Like I just like that is my takeaway. Is a neighbor, how dare you?
Oh my God, I thought the same thing. I'm like, why are you walking into someone's house
Is their home?
nonchalantly? And then they get blamed on because of what they're doing in their own household. I'm like, oh no, no. Like she
Yeah,
should have
no.
been there to begin with.
Exactly, of course. But it's like, it's the way that things go. And then you have, for the people who do watch, you'll know the neighbor. You'll know the neighbor and you'll immediately hate her. Like everybody else. But it's very, very awful, like how it all transpires, and then just that like revert. It's literally like you edit an image on Photoshop, and then it's just like revert all changes, and then it just goes back to the picture that you uploaded on a Photoshop, and it's just like you went nowhere. It feels like all of that work for literally nothing.
Yeah.
It's just really sad, but that's the climax of the movie. But I'm like saying it not to you, but the people listening. Yeah, that's probably my only thing. I love every bit of it. I mean, there's another moment that I actually love that's probably one of my favorite moments. It has just the same amount of stakes, but it's specifically when like Olive is storming away and Elizabeth chases after, and she goes, and Olive goes, like, I hate you with all of my heart. And they get eerily close. And you know it's gonna happen, but you don't know when it's gonna happen or how it's gonna happen, but you know it's gonna, like, it has to happen. At this point in time, in of itself, for their relationship, it is the point of no return. And I think that moment, like sometimes just my heart will stop if I'm watching it. I'm just like everybody shut up around me. We just have to watch this moment because there's so much happening in this. And it's yeah, their relationship is just fantastic. But yeah.
There is a lot of like, when you like clench up, because
Oh,
like you know what's gonna happen, but it's like the anticipation clench. Yeah.
yeah.
There's a
Oh.
lot of anticipation clenches.
Yes, it's so much. I mean, I'd almost want to rank them, like because it's that moment, it's their moment when like they're sitting all down and it's just kind of like the let's all be friends, and she's like, Olive, what do I long for? And she's like, and then Olive's just like, I
With the
think you long.
accent.
Yeah, just like just very, they're English, by the way. They're English. But just that, like, just the almost not like mid-Atlantic type of accent, but just like when Olive just blatantly says, I think you long for an unconventional life. And just that the receiving of that information on Elizabeth's side into her reaction of just like, I am angry at how much this person knows about me, like, and she doesn't have anything to say. There's nothing that she can say to it because Olive's not wrong. Like Olive is so not wrong. Like she's known who that woman is from the minute she set eyes on that person. And I think that that's also just true love, like true love where that person, I'm gonna close this because somebody's mowing their lawn. No, but just I think that just it doesn't I think it doesn't matter who you are, you know. Whatever life experience you have, the minute you meet somebody that you love and you care so much about and you have the agreement to like protect one another, there is that nonverbal look that you have with them and they know it all and you know it all for them, but there's a security and vulnerability in the same, like it's a security not for oneself, but it's a security for the other person and the vulnerability to allow that other person to really see those moments that not many people get to have the privilege to see just because they're not as close. So I really loved those nuanced moments of them genuinely get to know one another. And then just also the established fun relationship between William and Elizabeth. I think their banter, their communication, I'm literally just like all for it. I love it all. I love it all. As you can see, I'm a huge proponent on everything open. I love all of it. I think that it's, as long as there's really, really good communication, like it's just like that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's very enticing.
Yeah, it lets you in that like, this could be a thing. Like you can have an open,
Yeah.
relationship with multiple people. Like you can love multiple people. Like you can be happy. You can sister wives it.
Sister wives it. Oh, that's a funny one. I didn't even think about it, but yeah, now that I think, fuck, that is kind of what it looks like. Oh, geez, Louise. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorta.
yeah, I'm telling you.
Oh
This has been
man.
Film Spill, a movie night podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. All are at Film Spill Pod. Tell a friend about the podcast if you like, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That will help other people find Film Spill too. And you can follow Devin on where can we follow you?
Oh goodness, you can follow me. I honestly only use Instagram, but even that's so limited. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at DEVV_Taylor, TAYLOR.
And I will include that in the show notes as well.
Until next time, don't cry over a spilled film.